Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days of reading. And for those of you who are very familiar with these videos, welcome back. I'm going to be doing something a little bit differently this week. I'm actually going to be splitting this video into two. I read a lot of books and I read a lot of books from one particular series. So I'm actually going to split this video into two parts. One's going to go up today and one is going to go up on Wednesday, just to keep things contained and not running for like an hour because I ramble. This is my reading week from the 7th to the 13th of July. I read 13 books this week, a total of 3,896 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 192 books. For those who like to stay up to date with what I'm also watching, I rewatched The Matrix, John Wick, and John Wick 2 because after last week where I rewatched Speed, I decided to have a Keanu Reeves weekend last weekend. So that happened, and I also managed to finally finish season 3 of the originals, and I did watch the first episode of season 4 and then I got distracted by binge reading instead of binge watching. But I did trade an urban fantasy TV show for an urban fantasy book series, so I don't feel so bad about it. This week I actually set myself a challenge where Twitter picked my TBR. So about 2 weeks ago I put up a post on Twitter asking people to pick a couple of numbers, and those numbers correlated with pages and book numbers on my Kindle. Full confession, my Kindle basically contains urban fantasy, paranormal, romance of all sorts of descriptions, and the occasional other book in a different genre that I read when I can't be bothered picking up the physical book. There are a lot of things on here, and I don't worry about this so much as my TBR, as my physical TBR, because this is very contained and small and it's not going to cause havoc in my apartment where I have piles of books everywhere. By having people pick random numbers, it meant that I just read a whole stack of books off my Kindle, and that's essentially what I did. So let's jump into it. The first book that I read was picked by the coordinates 234 from Ilson, who is PL_lover13 on Twitter, so thank you very much. And that was Shadow Game by Christine Feehan, which is an urban fantasy paranormal book. It is the first book in the Shadow Walker series and it was published in 2003. I gave it 1 star. It was not fabulous. That's fine. It's okay because I think I got it for free anyway. It is a story of Lily, who is a genius scientist and also psychic, and Ryland, who is a psychically enhanced member of a group of soldiers who is being experimented on by Lily's father. When Lily's father dies under mysterious circumstances, Lily takes over his research and so on and so forth, and this is like a fated mate sort of trope. The thing that I didn't like about it is Ryland is basically sexist and overprotective, and not in a good way. There are those alpha type characters in books where they have redeeming qualities. He really didn't have any of them, which is why I didn't particularly like it. And Lily claims to be this strong, independent woman, and yet she's not. So that really rubbed me the wrong way. But it was good to read it and just to try a different author, because I know Christine Feehan is quite popular, but this just didn't work for me. Jane from Oh Yes, Miss Jane picked the numbers 27-2, which coordinated with Remote Control by Andy McNabb on my Kindle. This book was recommended to me by Lee Ann from Literary Diversions, so I was very pleased that this book came up because I really wanted to read it. It is the first book in the Nick Stone series. It was published in 2009 and I gave it 4 stars. So Nick Stone is a former SAS trooper who has become a deniable operative for British intelligence. So basically he gets sent in to do all those dirty little jobs that no one else wants to do. And he got this position after a botched SAS mission a few years earlier. In Remote Control, he is sent on a mission in the United States, only to be called off at the last minute. Before he leaves, he gets a call from a former SAS buddy who has moved to the States and has a family there, and he decides to go and have dinner with them before he flies back to the UK. And when he gets to his friend's house, he discovers that the family has been brutally murdered. His friend's wife, and the youngest child. And then he uncovers Kelly, who is a 7-year-old daughter of his friend, who was hiding and is the sole survivor of this murder. The two of them go on the run from killers while Nick tries to piece together what's happened and how it links back to the botched SAS mission that we read briefly about at the start of the book. It has really sustained action. It was really long, and it was, to me, it felt quite slow, but it had sustained action, so you constantly move through it. But I don't know, it felt long to me. But I enjoyed it. It was really interesting and very well written, and clearly Andy McNabb knows his stuff. I think he was a former SAS trooper himself, so it's very gritty and real life and raw, and the things that he has to do to keep himself and Kelly safe are quite extreme. It was really interesting reading from that perspective, and I will probably continue the series at some point. Jess from Game of Thrones gave me the coordinates 7-3, which coordinated to Hate Notes by Vi Killand and Penelope Ward, which is a romance book, and I really like it when these two authors write together. This book was published in 2018 by Montlake Press, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Charlotte, our protagonist, discovers a romantic message sewn into the inside of a wedding dress when she is looking in a secondhand shop while trying to sell off her own wedding dress, because her engagement has broken off quite suddenly and dramatically, and so she's trying to get rid of the dress and make some money. But while she's there, she's trying on this dress and she discovers the note, and it's a really romantic note, and she becomes obsessed with trying to find who wrote this romantic note and why this wedding dress is in a secondhand shop if there was such a connection between these two people who were going to get married. So she takes the note home and gets very, very drunk, drowning her sorrows about her own failed relationship, and she ends up setting up a penthouse viewing in order to meet the author of the note after she does some Facebook stalking and all that sort of thing. The two meet. It does not go well. She ends up crying in a bathroom where she meets an older woman who has her own business, and it's quite a big company, and offers her a job because she sees it. This woman sees a kindred spirit in Charlotte and sees that Charlotte is desperate to try and make something of herself but just needs a bit of guidance. Turns out that this is the same company of the writer of the note. The older woman is his grandmother, and the two have to work together. This is really an enemies to lovers sort of trope. It was fun and delightful, and it's a very slow burn sort of thing. It takes a long time for the two of them to warm up to one another because they're both characters, Charlotte and Reed. They are really closed off. They've had very, very bad experiences. There are things in their life that make them closed off. Reed in particular, like, he's an asshole. But once you realize sort of why he's keeping everyone at an arm's length, it sort of makes sense because he's trying to protect himself. So it's not excusable, but it's a reason. There are lots of little subplots. Personally, I really liked every conversation that involved Iris, Reed's grandmother, the one who gave Charlotte the job, because she is just a firecracker and I loved her to bits. And Max, who is Reed's younger brother, who's the charming rake of the story, and he was also just awesome, and I'd love a book about him because he was just so funny. Amy, whose username is Tama_Amy, picked 31 and 4, and this was Bond, and I have to read you the series title of this because it cracks me up to no end, and this is a perfect example of why my Kindle is full of random romantic trash. This series title is Stargazer Alien Mail Order Brides 1. Yes, it was pretty much like it sounded. It is a 2016 release from Story Press, and I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars, and the author is Tasha Black. So the premise, because this is hilarious, is that 3 girls go off to donate their eggs in order to pay off college fees. They end up being matched to 3 aliens who are normally sort of this form of energy, but they've come to Earth and scientists have helped to grow bodies for them. So they haven't taken over anyone's bodies, they've grown these bodies for them. They're getting used to the planet, I can't remember why they need to find brides. There is some reason, but I've forgotten because it was like 12 books ago that I read this book. Anyway, all these aliens' bodies have been grown, and the aliens themselves have been acclimatizing to the human planet and learning about human culture from 80s TV shows and movies. And then when they all meet, it's all going fine until they're threatened to be run out of town by the local town bullies. And so they decide to go and compete in a local festival's games series to see who's the winners so that they can stay or whatever. It was just weird and bizarre. And it got 2.5 because it was vaguely amusing and hilarious, but I don't even know. I don't even know how this ended up on my Kindle. Someone must have recommended it as something funny to read, so there's that. Bernadette from Bumble Bookworm picked 15-2, which was Captives by Angela Mayer. This is a 2014 release from Inkerman and Blunt, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. This is a collection of microfictions, and there's a whole lot of them. They range from a couple of sentences to a couple of pages long, so they're very varied in length. They're very poignant and eye-opening. They really deal with sort of life topics. There are some triggering concepts in here. Suicide and miscarriage are the two that I remember just thinking that people would be sort of wary of, but they are really sort of these snapshots of life moments, and they were really enjoyable, and it was nice to read this sort of collection of microfictions. I've read short stories, but I haven't read a collection of microfictions before, or at least not for a very long time. So this was really nice. And Angela Mayer is also Australian. So I can't remember where I found the recommendation for this book, but I'm glad that I actually had it on my Kindle and that I read it. It was really interesting, and I think I'll probably in the future start looking for more collections of microfictions just to see if I do actually really like that format. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video, or in this half of the video, is Galax Arena by Julian Rubinstein. Beck from Beckles Panda picked the coordinates 14.3, which brought up Galax Arena. Galax Arena was a book that I actually purchased for my Kindle because I remember reading it in year 8. So the story behind this book for me is that in year 8 I was at a school in Sydney, and in this particular high school in year 8 and year 9 you picked 4 semesters worth of genre-based literature units that basically formed your English units for 2 years. I was only at the school until year 8, so I only did 2 of these semesters. And one semester I picked crime and the other I picked science fiction because, hello, it's me. And Galax Arena was one of the books that we read for the science fiction unit, and I couldn't for the life of me remember anything about the story, just that I'd read it. So I saw it on Kindle and purchased it, and it's been sitting there waiting for me to reread it, so I was glad that this one came up. Didn't realise that this was technically a Lover's YA story, and it was a CBCA on a book for older readers back when it was released. So this was originally released in 1993 by Ligature, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It is a young adult book. It is the story of Joella and her 2 siblings, Peter and Leanne. They are travelling to visit their aunt when someone claims to be there to pick them up on behalf of their aunt, and then they end up being kidnapped and transported to become performers for an alien race. They're not the only ones. When they arrive at the Galax Arena, they discover a whole host of children who have been taken, and these are all children who have disappeared from circumstances where they were living on the street, or they didn't have parents, or they were disenfranchised in some way, and they were taken and trained as gymnasts to perform in the Galax Arena. Joella's siblings, Peter and Leanne, were picked because they fit the type of kids that they wanted for the Galax Arena, whereas Joella is sort of bigger and not really suited to gymnastics, but they took her anyway because she was with the kids. They did try to leave her behind. As the training goes on, eventually they decide that Joella is no longer suited, and she's separated from the group and given to one of the aliens as a pet. And so she's basically in isolation with this alien petting her through a little glass cage. Meanwhile, the performances in the Galax Arena become more and more dangerous and deadly. So these are gymnastic act performed without nets. The kids are in high energy, high adrenaline situations, and eventually deaths start to happen, and no one really seems concerned by this. And it goes on, and eventually Joella begins to realize what is actually happening and what it would take to escape the Galax Arena. It's funny, as I was reading it, I started to remember more about when I'd first read this book, but there are also things that I'd completely forgotten about, particularly Bro Rabbit, who is Leanne's pet rabbit that she was holding onto when she was taken. And within the Galax Arena, it begins to take on this life of its own, and it's quite creepy and disturbing. And once I started reading that, I remembered it, and it was just creepy. It's a very disturbing young adult book because it's dealing with child trafficking and, you know, enslavement and performance, and then children being treated as pets or animals for the gratification of others. So it was, you know, it's a confronting book to read, but I'm glad I reread it. I'm going to continue this wrap up in my next video, where I'm going to actually be talking about 7 books from the Kate Daniel series because Kirsty from Melbourne on My Mind picked the coordinates for Magic Burns, which she's psychic because this is like one of her favorite series. And so I read that and then decided to binge read the majority of the series for the rest of the week. So I'm going to talk about that in my next video. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below, and if you have read any of the books in this video, let me know as well. I'm hoping to do more of these Twitter Picks My TBR videos every couple of months, just because I want to get through my Kindle, and this is going to sort of be a way to do it. It's good motivation, but I will keep you guys posted when that's going to be happening. Once my second video goes up, I will leave a link to it on screen. Otherwise, I will catch you guys in my next video. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.